Hey folks, Tim Miller here, and I wanted to jump back on this week after the response we got last week off the video about the rising terror alert. Actually, I think it's a critical wake up for Americans. I think I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime. And I just want to be a voice of reason and preparation. I also want to be a voice of experience, having had some significant experience in the entire process of intelligence collection and law enforcement investigations and intelligence collection overseas and how we translate that. Let me just say this. I'm not trying to downplay. There's so much information out here in terms of different people's analysis and what they think is going on. Let me just share with you my background as an agent and as a Marine was all in intelligence. As a matter of fact, after 9/11, I worked in partnership with the FBI in what's called their National Joint Terrorism Task Force to kind of investigate and figure out what is, at that time, Al Qaeda going to do next. And, quite frankly, as everybody remembers, that was a 24/7 situation where there was so much information being put out about pending threats. And I'll just be honest, after last week's video, I've been, getting a lot of, hey, Sarah Adams has been saying this forever. And God bless Sarah Adams. She definitely has a background in targeting. Just to be clear, I also was assigned to the National Counterterrorism Center, and I was part of working with those folks in terms of identifying potential threats. And let me just say this about all the rhetoric that you hear about intelligence, because I'm seeing across the YouTube spectrum a lot of folks that are basically saying, hey, the attacks are going to be at hospitals, and the attacks are going to be at churches, and the attacks are going to be this or that. And let me just say this: if we knew where the attacks were going to be, I assure you that we would stop them. Now, let me say this: I am not in any way saying that those aren't on the spectrum. Any one of those transits, Mumbai style attacks, I think that's what Sarah said, basically, that, well, it's going to be a repeat aviation attack, or it's going to be a Mumbai style attack, or it's going to be a coordinated soft target attack against churches and malls and transits. And I'm not discounting anything that Sarah's saying, and I think her and Sean Ryan have done a great job and just trying to bring it back up to our attention that these are very dangerous times. So dangerous that I think for Americans to be in the dark is the most dangerous thing. And what I thought I'd do is just kind of follow up. And I know the title is, it may be worse than you think. And again, I'm not a doomsdayer. I am not someone that's trying to get clicks. I assure you, I'm not trying to get clicks. I just want to present a balanced perspective, having had a lot of experience across some of these areas. Let me say this: intelligence collection against terrorist organizations is difficult. Everybody knows it in the intelligence community. A lot of the traditional methods that were used early on. The terrorist organizations have identified them and compromised them. And so a lot of U.S. capabilities abroad were depleted under the Obama administration and the Biden administration. A lot of human opportunities were degraded, and so here we are. And that's not an indictment against them. That's just the way the administration chose to move forward. Now, let me say right from the start with this video that there are things happening so fast that the American people need to understand now is the time to prepare. And I've gotten a lot of hate about, oh, you're trying to, cause people to fear and panic, and, haters are going to be haters. But here's what I'm going to say to you. I'd much rather be the person that's prepared and ready than the person that after it happens goes, oh my gosh, I didn't have anything ready or prepared. Well, what am I talking about? And we touched briefly. I just want to go back over that a little bit. It's time to wake up. First off, up. What is up? Understand and prepare. Let me please challenge you. Be very careful who you listen to in terms of getting accurate information. There is a lot of clickbait out here. Everybody's got an opinion. I'm going to talk about some of the specifics of just this last week, but let me pause and say, and I don't have to preach this to you, we are seeing things happen every week, folks, that should cause us to go, wow, this really is becoming more of a problem. Let's just look real quickly over this last week. Russia intentionally violates U.S. airspace and NATO airspace, intentionally antagonizing, trying to cause a response. Well, why? Well, there is a lot of suspicion as to why. I think personally that Putin is suffering tremendously, and he's trying to get some level of leverage so that people will, especially in the European arena, that they would not escalate anymore against Russia. I don't think Russia can handle much more pressure, especially with their economy. So that could be one reason. I don't know. What I do know is the NATO countries are begging for a strong U.S. In the region, and that's what President Trump is doing, and he is strong. So it's going to be interesting to see there. So we have that escalation, which is huge, folks. We can't just discount that piece because of the other stuff. Well, what is some of the other stuff? We have a madman with a rifle attack an ICE facility, and interestingly enough, kill folks that were in the deportation process rather than ICE officers. But and we talked about this after the Charlie Kirk assassination. Unfortunately, for folks that are bent towards all of this leftist propaganda, and I do mean propaganda, that the other side are Nazis, that we're fascists, and we're going to destroy America. You couldn't be more off base than to look at a call for law and order through the lens of you're trying to destroy the country. What the government is trying to do, which is exactly what it should do, is to protect the people. So you've got a madman attack against an ICE facility. You've got the Russian situation in both Alaska and overseas. And then folks, it's like you can't make it up because it does seem to be awful interesting to me that we have this going on.
Prosco is with me from Washington. Jackson, how and where did they find this?
Well, Donna, the Secret Service says it uncovered the network while investigating a spate of anonymous telephone threats to U.S. lawmakers. It traced those threats to several apartments, all located within about a 50-kilometer radius of UN headquarters in New York City. And you can see from the pictures there are hundreds of transmitters, about 300 SIM servers, and 100,000 SIM cards, all of which authorities say were capable of shutting down the city's cellular network. Now, so far, no one has been arrested, but the Secret Service says it's working to identify suspects. The scale of this operation is what's so alarming.
It can send out 30 million text messages a minute, encrypted, anonymous, which means that it could theoretically text the entire nation in 12 minutes. So that's problematic. Not to mention all the other things, taking out cell towers, denying services.
Jackson, it does sound like a potentially powerful threat. Is there any indication who's behind it?
No specifics yet, but authorities are suggesting that there is at least one foreign nation involved that has links to criminals and cartels already in the United States. These are all groups that are essentially already known to law enforcement. Now, the Secret Service says it has never seen such an extensive operation before, and they caution that there could be similar networks operating in other U.S. cities. We should also point out that there's reason to believe that this has been a long-running operation, and there's no reason to believe that the UN Assembly was a specific target here. But the timing, with so many world leaders in one place at one time, is what prompted officials to move quickly to begin shutting this down in late August. Donna?
All right.
Folks, I don't know how else to say it, that this is happening at a record pace, because this, for the Secret Service, by the way, the first time ever they've dismantled an organization like that, is very concerning. And again, we're not, trying to be alarmists here. We're just saying, why? Why would that equipment be there? Now, the news is going towards the news commentary. Well, it was probably cartel related, but what if it wasn't? Let me just say this. I do know enough about the investigation to know that it went back into the spring. It was largely, it flowed out of a focused attack electronically against some of our elected leaders, which, by the way, the Secret Service has some of the best electronic investigative methods available. And I'm very thankful that they're back to stopping things again. They're proactive. They've got some really good people in that arena. So they did stop this attack, but I want you to think about the scale of the equipment there and the proximity. Some are discounted. Oh, that wasn't, that was cartel related and it was used for this or used for that. Let me just be clear. If you could overwhelm any basic communication system that you wanted to with that level of technology. Now, let's just paint a picture. I don't know what this was about, and the Secret Service is being very cautious, appropriately cautious to say we're still investigating, which is what they should do. But what if that focus was to disrupt, communications? Let me tell you, when the UN is in town, it is chaos in New York. You have protective details everywhere. You have some very high priority, high profile folks, and then you have the logistics and all that. Can you imagine the impact if there were isolated attacks and these entities couldn't communicate? That would be a disaster. And, to Sarah's point, a coordinated attack like that certainly is within the pale. And so we're looking at, what was that all about? But let me pause. First time in U.S. history. So, as folks were saying to me, oh, all you're doing is beating the same drum. Well, I would say to you, yeah, there have been warnings for a long time. But when you begin to see stuff like this happen, where a coordinated attack of a mass scale, whatever it was stopped, as Americans, we ought to go, oh, yeah, maybe we ought to pay attention to that. And so, you look at those three events, and then you get this mystery call from DOD saying every general officer in the United States military, we want you all in one location for a brief. Well, that begs the question. I'm a retired Marine Corps Reserve Lieutenant Colonel, and I understand enough about having worked with general officers, especially, in my MOS, my background, that they're busy and they have tons of stuff to do. So for the SecDef to say, I need you all in person, that tells me a lot about the urgency of what that's about. Now, I've heard a lot of folks, going through the pontification, it could be this, it could be that. Hey, look, there's really one person or a staff that knows what it's about, and that's Secretary Hegseth. We're going to know, because you're not going to be able to keep that kind of information down. But here's the concern that I have in light of everything else that we're seeing is, are we looking at, adjusting unified commands? Are we looking at particular hotspots based on intel? Are we looking at internal threat concerns based on what's happening? Because, folks, I don't have to convince you, as you see Charlie Kirk, as you see attacks on ICE, as you see this rhetoric across the landscape of the left that seems to encourage violence. And it's shocking to me, and I know I said this the last video, I want to say it again, this is not a right-left issue. This is a good-evil issue. And you don't have to think too hard about what's good and what's evil. If you think that assassinating a person that speaks differently than you do is okay, that your cause over arches any ability for people to have differences of opinion, differences of points of view, then you fall. Wear the evil jersey. You're on the evil team, because there's no justification, none, for taking another's life because they speak differently. And I know I've seen nothing but the back and forth this week. It breaks my heart, because I will tell you, folks, I think we're more divided as a nation, first, than I've ever seen in my life. But then second, probably since 1859, where Americans were getting ready to line up and kill each other and in the Civil War. So I hope and pray that's not the case, but it does cause us. We need to wake up. The threats are real. I talked about the internal threats. Let's just kind of talk about some of the internal threats. The first is this wave of violence from the left, both in words, but actually now with rifles, writing on bullets designed to kill people, that there's no tolerance for any other opinion. That's serious, folks. When you have a far left agenda that is completely focused on labeling the other party, as fascists and saying that violence is enough, that's a huge internal problem. Why? Because it's very difficult to identify who is of that bent. Unfortunately, we're seeing after these mass violent events that it's coming out, oh yeah, well, they had took a turn. And unfortunately, oftentimes it's based on the violence of the internet. You take a young man who's been raised in a good home, and now all of a sudden he has gone crazy radical to the point he's an assassin, and he's being killed or killing himself. So we've got that. And then in concert with that, you heard the president this week talk about Antifa and the danger that they are. Why? Because they want to destroy where they can. They come armed to do combat. They're wearing vests and helmets, and they're coming with an agenda to destroy. And they're being specifically funded to destabilize the U.S. government, to cause chaos, and then, that's their political agenda. But then you have, just a stone cold communist. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that. Look at New York. Look at, for the first time ever, New Yorkers are seriously considering a pure communist as a candidate. And it's, call it socialism, call it communism. They're twin brothers in my mind. But this is horrifying. And imagine the largest city in the U.S. Being run by that. All you have to do, if you want to see the forward attractions coming, is look at London. I was in London about 8-9 months ago. I couldn't believe it was London. It was chaotic. Went into one of the large tourist areas there, and there was human excrement on the stairs going up. There was open animosity and violence. And, I just thought to myself, oh, I hope that's not coming to America, but I fear it is. And again, remember, all of these forces inside are working together. Wake up. Understand that they don't have an agenda to talk to people and try to work it out. We saw that with Charlie Kirk. If we say anything that they don't like, violence is open. That's the agenda. They make all kinds of comments that are interesting, that sound good, but when you really boil down to, if you're calling someone a Nazi, a fascist, what you're saying is you are the same violent folks that killed 6 million Jews. Well, I'd pause for a second and say, wait a minute, which side is most going after the Jewish people? And then you go down the list. The Nazis absolutely, used indiscriminate violence. I mean, just unbelievable violence. To attack anybody that spoke up. The first thing they did is took over, all of the youth. And I would pause there and say, how important is it that moms and dads are able to raise their children without interference from the state. That was the first thing Hitler did that he really recognized. If he doesn't grab a hold of the young people of Germany, he'd never be able to carry out his violent agenda. So interesting. So we've got the inside threats. Then we have the outside threats. And I mentioned Russia, China, North Korea. Folks, I don't think in my lifetime there's been a more evident threat, other than the 1940s, which I wasn't around, against the U.S. and the principles of our republic. And I want to say this too, folks pointed out in the last video, hey, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. They're 100% right. And that was just a misspeaking on my part. But our republic is absolutely dependent on our ability, to have the right to free speech, the right to bear arms, and we go down the list. I happen to believe our founding fathers were extremely wise people that understood what power can do in the wrong hands. And so you have Russia, China, North Korea. You also still have a lot of folks in the radical Muslim community that want to kill us. So, that's Al-Qaeda. But, it's funny because everybody is talking about Al-Qaeda that has been reconstituted fully because of our policies in withdrawing from Afghanistan, giving them operating bases, giving them capabilities. We know a lot of that U.S. military equipment has been sent out to support other things. But folks, ISIS is still out there. They're still strong. Some have said, oh, no, they were completely decimated. You might want to look at who's running Syria right now, because that's a pretty good indication they're not decimated. And as a matter of fact, they may be reconstituting in a way that is concerning, because if you think about it, that mindset is going to do nothing but try to get stronger. And then you have, I would remind everybody, Iran is down but not out. The IRGC is fully still functional. Now, how functional, that's, I'm not going to speak to that. I'm not an expert, but I will tell you this. They have significant presence in the U.S., as does AQ and ISIS. And to Sarah's point, back in the day, I was reviewing a lot of the intelligence at that time. I'm pretty sure she's not accessing that either. And so we're basically reverting back to what have they done in the past? What are they likely to do? I would remind everybody that, everybody prior to 9/11 thought we had really good intel on the capabilities. Nobody expected that they would fly planes into the building. That came out of nowhere. We cannot expect that terrorist organizations are going to do the same things they've always done. And I don't know who's behind the effort in New York, but here's what I do know. That was a mass attack that focused on technology. That was a mass attack that could have crippled infrastructure. Folks, that is concerning. That can attacking infrastructure can cause the U.S. to go into panic very quickly. And then finally, I think outside of the U.S., just this whole world globalist movement that tries to strip the sovereignty of the U.S. We've seen the animosity of the UN, and I would just warn you, anything as Americans that seeks to undermine our constitutional, and I'm going to say it, God-given rights, we as Americans should look at and go, oh no, that's not going to happen. Because, folks, here's the reality of where we live today, and that's why I wanted to do another update, and I'm going to keep on doing them because the feedback I've got has been overwhelming. By the way, I appreciate all the feedback. Please like and subscribe and tell me where you're located, because what's interesting is, back to the good evil thing, when you watch a young lady butchered with a knife on a train car in Charlotte, you can't say, well, that's okay because, you see, he has been mistreated. No, you have to call it what it is, which is pure pit of hell evil. And I've said it and I'm going to keep saying it, when Americans stop saying we need to have more gun control and start saying we need to have more evil control, then we're going to start seeing things turn around. When we begin to, again, we did this in our country, hold people accountable, regardless of color, regardless of sex, regardless of anything. When you cross the line and begin to attack people, you are a thug and a criminal. That's what it is. And I know that that's rhetoric that I'm going to get some feedback on, but that's the truth. And so as I kind of wind down, I wanted to circle all the way back around to, I talked about on the last video, the up thing, understand and prepare. Folks, listen to me. If you are not paying attention, you're not watching what's going on. Now, hear me. I'm not saying we're paranoid. I'm not saying that, we're fear, doom, and gloom. None of that. What I'm saying is, if you and I as Americans that believe in our country, love our country, if we don't wake up to what's going on, it's going to be too late, because this stuff's happening so fast now, we can't keep up. Every week there's another mass killing. Every week there's something provocative internationally, whether it's Russia or China. Every week we're seeing stuff identified, dismantled, arrested, or folks arrested. So now we need to wake up and realize, whoa, this is a different scenario than any time in our history. But then you have to train up. And I got a lot of questions. Tim, what do you mean train up? Well, let me say this first and foremost. If you're going to go to a public area, you now have to understand what it takes for you to be safe in public places. We do a lot of videos on the channel. Please go check them out. I try to give you practical things. But let me tell you, it starts, folks, with being alert and aware. And it starts with taking this thing right here and putting it away, paying attention. Learn how to identify things that are suspicious. Body language, watch people's actions, be thinking everywhere you go. Where are exits? How would I get myself and my family out of here if I have to? When you go into restaurants, think about where you sit, because it could be the difference between life or death. You may actually see it if you have backs to the wall. Also, back to the exits thing, and I'm sorry, I'm on a roll. Back to the exits things, do you know that folks that identify second and third exits in the midst of a crisis, their survival goes up 90%? If you think about what we saw even in the Charlie Kirk assassination, people all turned and they ran one direction towards the shooter. Well, those are things that we need to think about. Now, they didn't know what was going on. They were reacting. My point is, you can't react anymore. You got to have a plan. You got to have a relocation area identified for where you're going to go, where you're going to meet your family. And those are things, I'm sorry, my training hat came on, but we're training up. And let me just say this, we're training all over the country. I just came back from training a Fortune 100 company. And I got to tell you, every single employee that, we train crisis preparation and response, they all came up to me after, thank you. We don't know what to do. And now we feel like you have some skills. So wherever you can get training. What kind of training? Security training for sure, but medical training. Everybody needs to go through a Stop the Bleed course, a CPR course. These are practical things. Why are you saying this, Tim? Because you don't know. With what's going on in the U.S., it may be that tourniquet that you went and learned how to use with the Stop the Bleed course saves your child. So we train up. Now is the time. And then, folks, we have to stand up. You're going to stand for good or fall to evil. Those are your choices. It is time now for every American to stand up. No longer be intimidated by, we're going to cancel you, we're going to get loud, we're going to get violent, we're going to hurt you. I learned as a kid there's one way to stop a bully. And that's by doing what we're saying right now. You wake up, this guy's a bully. You train up. And then, when I was a kid, you trained up to defend yourself. And it's funny, once you were strong and powerful and able to remind them that probably is not the wisest thing to do, then the bully leaves you alone. And then finally you stand up. So we wake up, we train up, and we stand up. And folks, I hope these videos are helpful for you. I just, as I watch what's going on, I look and I'm thankful for the Sean Ryans and the Sarah Adams, and I feel like we need a chorus of people that really have, the ability to share accurate information, because there are a lot of folks sharing a lot of things without context, background, that kind of thing. I will tell you this, just one final note on all the intelligence. The reason I put it in air quotes is because the information about specific targeting is very difficult. And I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm sure there are technical methods, but I wouldn't depend on that. I would depend not on them saving me, on me being prepared and saving me. So I hope this is helpful, folks. Please like, share, subscribe. I'm going to start doing at least one video a week on a specific topic. But, there are a lot of videos on the channel. I'd love for you to check out some of the things that are changing in terms of, sniper attacks and those kinds of things. We do have a pretty good one from one of the guys on our team that survived the whole Las Vegas sniper attack, had some great insight. But let me just say this, when you're in public, be alert, aware, and prepared. Because I really believe we need good Americans everywhere to stand up and to defend our country. I really do believe we're at that point. And I know that makes certain people that love to ridicule our perspective, it makes them angry. And that tells me we're on track. If we're sharing the truth in love, that's going to offend people. And so I hope and pray this is helpful. I hope that all of us, wake up, train up, and stand up. It's time. There is no opportunity to delay anymore, and there are all kinds of things we're going to talk about in the days ahead. So if this is helpful, please let me know. Please let me know where you're coming from. I'm going to start doing lives. I just have to get the bandwidth. I'll be honest. We're just running hard, but I'm very grateful for you all to take time to listen to me. I hope it's helpful, and we will be back. So please stay safe out there.